this over. Okay. We are streaming. Very good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to the many students watching these satsangs online. Nice to have you all on board, as they say. Just check this. We are, yeah. What am I looking for that? Okay. Looks okay. All right, good. We have a lot of nice questions here from our online students. We may also have some questions here from our local students. We'll alternate as we have in the past. And let me apologize in advance. We're not going to get through all of the questions. We'll do the best we can. We'll start with the question from our online students. This from Prashanto, who lives in Dhaka, Bangladesh. He says, no knowledge in Sanskrit, so I would like to know the English meaning of the prayer you say before the class. Before and after every class, there are certain prayers that are traditionally chanted, and these are prayers taken from the Vedas. And I think instead of explaining it here, better you go to our website and you'll find all of the prayers. In fact, there's a lot of material available on our website. And you can find maybe under a section for chanting or Sanskrit, go there and you'll find the translation of all of the prayers that we do on the website. Next question from Arun, who lives in Bangalore. Nice. He recaps very briefly the opening portion of the Katha Upanishad, in which the Lord of Deaths, Dharma Raja, tries to lure this boy Nachiketas and allure him away from seeking spiritual things. And he says, wouldn't you rather enjoy the world? In fact, it'll take a half an hour to tell that story. Anyway, Nachiketas in the Katha Upanishad represents the ideal student, the Uttama Adhikari. And he's so convinced that he wants moksha. I think at one point, Yama even tempts him, wouldn't you rather have a big palace with dancing girls and all of this stuff? And he just refuses all of that. He says, I don't want what is preyas, what is desirable. I want that which is shreyas, ultimately desirable. And to use the words that are used there. So Arun's question then is, how can a spiritual seeker start to develop the spiritual qualities of Nachiketas? How to become as much of a qualified student as Nachiketas, who was just an amazing example. How to start? You've already started. You've asked this question, you're watching these satsangs. In fact, satsang itself is considered one of the most important practices. Just a few anyway, all of your spiritual practices, including satsang, will prepare you. Meditation, prayer, any form of meditation, karma yoga, all of these practices are meant to foster this qualities like Nachiketas. But something that's really been underrated, I don't know what, is satsang, what we're doing right now. It's actually considered the most powerful spiritual practice. Why? And bear in mind that satsang isn't always like what we do. Sometimes satsang, in fact, in many parts of India, satsang is used for bhajan, kirtan, and singing, devotional singing. So, and also, there are many people who, many times satsang is not so clear and focused, because we try to make it here. So satsang comes in many flavors, so to speak, and even still it's considered the most powerful spiritual practice for making you a qualified student. Why? In a word, community. When we become part of a community, in this case a spiritual community, a community of students here in New Jersey, a community of students online. When we become part of a community, that's one of the most, you know already, it is so important to be part of a community. The most obvious community all of you are part of is your families. You get the support of being in a family. Here we get the support of being in a spiritual family, so to speak. The amount of support you receive from your immediate family members, you know how important that is. Here, when you become part of a spiritual community, the support we gain from being related as fellow spiritual seekers, that even if you don't talk to your fellow seekers, it doesn't make any difference. You still gain the emotional support. You know, if you attend satsang and don't talk to anyone at all, you still know you are not alone. And sometimes spiritual seekers feel lonely. Everyone off is running to the mall, and some of you are running to the ashram or watching this online. What a difference. Run to the mall. Here in New Jersey, Sunday morning. That's a favorite time for shopping, right? So many people are running to the mall. Here you are running to an ashram of all places. I'm sure you feel isolated from time to time. I certainly did when I was a young man. So satsang is incredibly important. Then next question from Shaku. Then I'll take some questions here. Shaku lives in Texas, and I think it's a she, mostly Shakuntala, usually. Shaku asks, what is mantra diksha? Mantra diksha is a formal initiation with a mantra. It's usually given by a guru to a disciple who's been around. By the way, to be qualified for mantra diksha, the usual rule is you have to be a student for 12 years. That's the usual rule. Is it useful, helpful to get mantra diksha from a guru for a householder like me? Of course, diksha is helpful, but why wait 12 years? And why? There are also a lot of rules. If you get formal initiation, then there are formal rules that govern your use of that mantra, which is why in the tradition in which I've been trained, our mantra diksha is not formal. It's informal. You don't have to wait 12 years. We don't give you a lot of rules you have to follow when you recite your mantra. It's just very simple. And let's see. Do you offer mantra diksha to those who request you? What are the do's and don'ts after you get one? As I said, for formal mantra diksha, it's complicated and formal. Informal mantra diksha means when you attend a meditation session that I conduct and I teach you a mantra to recite in that meditation session, that is informal mantra diksha. You've received a mantra from a guru. Guru teaches you how to pronounce it properly. You recite it together. That's mantra diksha. the informal mantra diksha. You don't have to wait 12 years. You don't have to follow all the rules. Okay. Do we have any questions in here? We'll start here.
Namaskar, Swamiji. Swamiji, if we can go back to the board, what we discussed today.
Could I suggest that we don't do that? Ask me, because many of the satsangis watching online won't have attended the class we just saw. What I would suggest is ask me after class, whatever is your question. The question here, in back here. You'll need the microphone. Thank you.
Namaste, Swamiji. So, you've been our e-guru, and we've come from Maryland just to be with you. And I have two questions. One, are all Swamijis enlightened?
No.
In a sense?
No.
Because they...
That's easy. Next question.
Okay. All right. That's fine. They are also on the path like us then. Okay.
No, not all. You said all. So some sannyasis are enlightened. Why not? You said, are they all
To become a
enlightened?
Swamiji. You don't need...
I didn't understand your question.
So
I'm sorry.
when one becomes, wears those saffron robes...
Being
and
enlightened is not a requirement for being a sannyasi. One who becomes a sannyasi may or may not be enlightened. One who is a sannyasi may or may not be enlightened. Okay, sorry.
That was easy. So the second question is, so when one reaches enlightenment and gets moksha, the consciousness is supposed to be one at this point, and one is supposed to be Ishvara, a part of Ishvara. But I'm kind of, I have a question as to what exactly, how do I envision what happens? How do I envision that consciousness? How do I know that what happens?
I'm not sure about. The question is not quite clear to me. Enlightenment, as we understand in Advaita Vedanta, is the technical word Atma Sakshatkara, the immediate personal recognition of your true nature. So you are that one consciousness even now, whether you know it or not, but you may not know. Problem then is ignorance. The removal of ignorance is enlightenment. It's a common mistake to think that in enlightenment we get something. And we're common in language. I use it, you said you reach enlightenment. It's a figurative reaching. And it's a figurative reaching because your true self, Satchidananda Atma, the consciousness which is present in your experience right now, is already limitless, full, and complete. And that's who you are, the truth of who you are. So it's not that you need to become, let's make it very clear. We commonly use this expression, inner divinity, to describe that Atma. Please note that you don't become divine. You already are. And to use my guru put it in lovely words, you already are that which you want to become. Problem is ignorance. You don't know. So then moksha, enlightenment, is, and I'm going to say this deliberately, merely the removal of ignorance. Nothing is being added to you. You're already full, complete, infinite, limitless, boundaryless. How can you improve on that? Nothing is added to you. Enlightenment is merely, and I'm being very deliberate in using that word, enlightenment is merely removing ignorance. Does that work for you? Okay. Okay, let's take a few more questions online. We got a lot of questions. All right. Next question from Cody, who asks, from the fact that Krishna, and this is an interesting question. the fact that Krishna, Shiva, Durga, and all the other Hindu deities are all forms of Ishvara. So he asks, I think it's he, I'm not sure. Cody asks, can we create our own personal deity to be our own personal form of Ishvara? Personal form of Ishvara is ishta, devata. You get, in the Hindu tradition, you get to choose. So then, if you get to choose, you can worship any deity you want. As Cody said, you can worship Krishna, Shiva, Durga, or any other. You get to choose. So if you get to choose, do you get to invent your own deity? That's not conventionally taught. The deities we worship all come from scriptures. But when I look at these questions beforehand, and when I saw Cody's question, I wondered, okay, it's not traditional, but is there any harm in inventing your own deity? Absolutely unconventional. Is there any harm in it, or is it as beneficial as choosing some other deity? Well, it seems to me that if you invent your own deity, which is fully consistent with our understanding of Ishvara, that's the key. You can invent your own form, but it has to be a form of Ishvara. Can't be any other form. So if you can create your own form, and the form you create is absolutely consistent with how the ancient rishis conceived of Ishvara, then even though it's extremely unconventional, I can't see any harm in it. In fact, I can see great benefit in it. There's great benefit in tailoring these teachings and practices to your personal need. To me, that in my own life, my own practice, this has been so important. You know, we are literally in an ocean of wisdom, and no one can possibly understand it all or make use of it all or apply it all or implement it in your life. It's not possible. So it seems like we should be highly selective in finding what teachings and what practices help us the most, and then incorporate those into our daily, day-to-day lives, our day-to-day practice. So it's a funny metaphor. There, in medicine, this, what is the term they use? Not individualized medicine, personal medicine, where drugs are tailored according to one's genome. There's a term for that. Personalized medicine? I think something like that. So in this, we're right at the cusp. This has just begun, where treatments have always been tailored to the patient. That's always been there. But now we're taking the next step, where even particular medications are being tweaked to better address an individual patient's problems. That's a great approach for us to apply. And to be more specific, to consider where you are on your own path of spiritual growth and what you need the most, and to give that priority. Some people might be lacking meditation. Well, maybe that should be a focus. Some people might be lacking bhakti. Then that should be a focus. Some people might be lacking clarity about these teachings. So it depends on the individual. So choose carefully whatever practices address you most directly. This question is from Gayatri. is it true, Gayatri asks, is it true that I thought that ancient temples like Tiruvannamalai, this wonderful, huge Shiva temple next to the mountain there. So that temples like Tiruvannamalai and other regions like Rishikesh, up in the mountains, Joshimath, Badrinath, places I used to visit so often. Gayatri asks, was it merely my imagination or ignorance that it seemed like those places had such a powerful presence of Ishvara, more so than in other places? And there's a paragraph introducing it. I'll paraphrase. Gayatri says that through these teachings, she's understood that Ishvara is equally present everywhere. Here, 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 here. Ishvara is, if Ishvara is all-pervasive, if Ishvara is the, better put, if Ishvara is the underlying reality because of which everything exists, does this exist? Then does this iPad, the old one, does this iPad have Ishvara as its underlying reality, like this pot has clay for its underlying reality? Yeah. So there is nothing in which Ishvara is absent. So Gayatri's question then is, then why bother going to the temple? Ishvara is equally present inside, outside. Why bother going up into the Himalayas to these places, Joshimath, Badrinath, etc.? Why bother if Ishvara is present everywhere? Well, Ishvara is present everywhere. There's no doubt about that. The question is, are you capable of perceiving Ishvara everywhere? That's a whole other thing. For example, if you're walking, this is such a not funny, it's a sad example. Suppose you're walking down a road in a little town in India someplace, and you see there's a small roadside temple, many you'll see ever, and right next to the temple is a big garbage dump. Only in India. Sorry, but that's a very common occurrence. So everyone in the town, yeah, by the way, don't blame them. Do they have garbage pickup like you have at your homes? If they did, India would be a much cleaner place. Anyway, their infrastructure is still growing. We are blessed with a very sophisticated infrastructure, so don't blame it on, oh, the people are dirty. Absolutely not. They're lacking in infrastructure. So you do see a small temple with a pile of garbage right next to it. Stinking garbage, because everyone just throws. Cows are there eating and going through there and all of that. Typical scene. Tell me, based on what we just said, is Ishvara more present in the temple as the garbage dump or equally present? Equally. Well then, why do you choose to go into the temple and not into the garbage dump? Should be 50-50, right? So half the time you go into the temple, half the time you go into the garbage dump. It doesn't work that way because it's so much easier to appreciate Ishvara's presence in the temple. So it's for that very simple reason. And all of these tirthas, these holy places we like to visit, they are all like that. There are places which make it easier for us to recognize Ishvara's presence. So when we go to those places, we feel that presence so much more. Okay. Next question from Malar. Malar is from Coimbatore, near where my guru's ashram is. She asks, do plants have souls? From the standpoint of science, maybe not. From the standpoint of common sense, we don't know. But according to the ancient rishis, from this ancient world view, anything that's alive is said to be endowed with a subtle body, a sukshma sharira. That's part of an ancient world view. You can accept it. You need not accept it, since modern science would probably establish otherwise. But then again, modern science can't establish that you and I have soul, sukshma sharira. So it's a topic that is inaccessible to science. Let me just make that point a little bit clear. And that is, science deals with the tangible, the world. Anything that can be measured, observed. That's science, right? Here's the problem when we're talking about the so-called soul, or to use a more precise term, sukshma sharira, subtle body. By definition, the subtle body is imperceptible. So then how can science study it? How can science say it exists? How can science say it doesn't exist? Since science has no access to it. So we're seeing some of the complexity behind Malar's question. So do plants have souls? From one perspective, we don't know, but according to this tradition, anything that's alive. Then she goes on to say, a lot of plants can be propagated through cuttings. You cut, in fact, I've got this plant upstairs. What is it, a ficus, or I don't know what they call it. And they got these long botanical names. I don't know what they are. Anyway, when this thing puts out these long things of leaves, when it gets too long, I chop it off, and I put it in water, and then it grows roots, and then I plant it. So the question is, have I just created another soul? This is This is Malar's question. I think it's a very clever question, and I have no idea how to answer that. I don't think ancient rishis, I don't think, have ever really talked about that much. So, some questions we don't have very satisfactory answers for. So do we create new souls when we do that? I have no idea. Does a single cellular life have a soul? Kind of the same thing. We don't really know if the cell lives and reproduces like an amoeba, which is called a single-celled animal. Presumably that amoeba would have a sukshma sharira if it's a living being. All right. That's from Muller. Here's from Hiranmoy. What is the difference between waking experience and dream experience? Hiranmoy asks. He lives in India. Mostly it's common sense, but from a technical standpoint, the difference between waking and dream is less than you think. Try this. We know that the dream experience is very rich and it's as real as our waking experience right now. I didn't say real, I said as real. This experience isn't completely real, and your dream experience is even less so. But it seems real at the time. The main difference, as I'm sure Hiranmoy already knows, is that in the waking state, we have input from the five senses. Through our five senses, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. We gain information about the world that is missing in the dream state. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. In fact, in both cases, this is actually a more Vedantic answer. In both cases, what you experience directly is the contents of your mind, right? Even right now, as you see me, the image of me you see directly is in your mind. The me sitting in this chair is known to you indirectly. In fact, for Hiranmoy, the indirectly was several levels. So you're looking at a screen. So that's one level of indirection, of being indirect. There's whole internet network is in between you and me. And then your eyeballs also make it indirect. Even for those students who are here sitting in front of me, you see me indirectly by means of your eyes. The me that you see directly, for you and for Hiranmoy, the me that you see directly is the one that is recreated in your mind. A Swami Tadatmananda who arises in your mind. That's true equally for waking state and dream state. The only big difference is, as I said, the presence or absence of your five senses. Here's a little mental experiment. Suppose you lost your sense of smell. Okay. So you've had a bad cold. You know what that's like. Suppose you lost your sense of taste also. Yeah, really bad cold. You can also, I suppose, you lose that. You can't smell or taste anything. Now, suppose you lost your by the way, all of this temporary. Suppose you lost your sense of hearing. Okay? Suppose you lost your sense of sight. What would that be like? And suppose your body was numb, head to toe. Blind, deaf, and numb. To draw a comparison. Tell me, in that condition, how would you know if you were awake or dreaming? I don't know. How would you differentiate waking state from dream state? So, all a matter of the senses. All right. Other questions here? Okay. We have a lot here, so that's just fine. All right. Next from Sukumar in UK. Sukumar says, let me, it's a little long, let me paraphrase it. So he says, as a teenager, I always admired Porsche cars. Teenage boys get this kind of obsession with something really fancy like that. And for about 30 years, better I just read it. For about 30 years, I would have liked to have owned a Porsche, but I never had the money to afford one. In the last few years, my money, my desires for a Porsche have gone. Now that he can afford it. So now he can afford it, he doesn't care anymore. And he says, my desire has gone because I know that the happiness we get from objects is transient and the true source of contentment is within. So, his question, Sukumar asks, is it that my desires from earlier lives have been burnt in the fire of knowledge, or will this need need to be, or will this desire need to be fulfilled in future births? Sukumar is referring to a doctrine that's not universally held, a doctrine that says if you don't fulfill a desire in this life, you have to be reborn to fulfill that desire in the next life. That is not that is a perspective on the doctrine of karma. It is not universally accepted. Some people accept it, some people don't. But what difference? So setting that aside, we don't know. There's no rule. Let me put it in these terms. There's no rule that says if you desire a Porsche in this car in this life and you don't fulfill it in this life, then you have to buy a Porsche in your next life. That is silly. And to show you why it's silly, suppose your desire for a Porsche, Sukumar's desire for a Porsche in this life, presumably would be because he desired a Porsche in a previous life. Suppose his previous life was 200 years ago. You getting it? Could he have desired a Porsche 200 years ago? You get my point. So I think we have to set that aside. This perspective on a doctrine of karma, to me, it doesn't make sense. So the fact is that Sukumar here is blessed by a kind of maturity that we gain with the help of these teachings of Vedanta, and that is we grow up spiritually. Let me explain that. When you were a child, you had a favorite toy. You really loved that toy. You had a tremendous desire for that toy. I presume you don't have it today. Do you miss it? Do you still have that? You outgrew that desire. This happens to us all. There's so many desires and things that we thought were important to our well-being, important to our gaining happiness. So many things we've had in previous portions of our lives, we have outgrown them all. Like he's outgrown the need for a Porsche. How wonderful that is, because, put it like this, the more unfulfilled desires you have, the more miserable you are. To outgrow those desires, you don't need to fulfill it. Do you have to buy a Porsche to get rid of that desire? Unfulfilled desires make you suffer. Did Sukumar need to fulfill his desire for a Porsche to become free from suffering? Not at all. He outgrew that desire. If we think about all the desires that we bear, can you fulfill them all? Of course not. But you can outgrow them all. And that's what these teachings of Vedanta are all about. Okay. Then, next question from Sanjay, who lives in Mumbai. Question. Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, as you know very well. It's a small 700-verse segment drawn from that vast 84,000 verse text. But then he asks about the yoga relationship. So we know the relationship between Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata. He's asking now about the relationship between Yoga Vasishta and Ramayana. Ramayana you know, but you may or may not know about the Yoga Vasishta, which is all about Rama. In fact, it's often called Maharamayanam, Not like the Ramayana, but it's all about Rama. Rama is the main character throughout the Yoga Vasishta. So he asks, why is the Yoga Vasishta not part of the Ramayana? Well, the Yoga Vasishta doesn't, technically the Bhagavad Gita is actually verses drawn from the Mahabharata itself. The Yoga Vasishta is a completely independent text. It was, in fact, independent text. The original, the original, is that right? Valmiki. No, that doesn't work. Regardless of authorship, the Yoga Vasishta is an independent text. It's not a part of the Yoga Vasishta. It's not part of the Ramayana. He says it would have given better understanding of Rama if it were included in the Balakanda of the Ramayana. No, we don't get it. Sanjay says it would be nice. Well, many things would be nice. It would be nice if we didn't have cancer and headaches. But anyway, Yoga Vasishta is a completely independent text. It's not a portion. Another question here from Amit, who lives in India. Enlightenment puts an end to suffering. This is Amit's question. He lives in India. But suppose an enlightened person has a health issue and is bedridden and will not be able to discharge his or her duties, then will they not be frustrated? Would they not suffer? And he goes, suppose an enlightened person, this is better. If an enlightened person has financial issues, or his boss, it goes on, sorry. I'm just trying to, no, Amit's question is very nice. I'm just trying to be a little bit more concise. He does give an example of Sri Ramakrishna and Ramana, who had that very situation at the end of their lives. They both died of cancer, different cancers, and they refused, at the end of their lives, they refused treatments and died of their ailments, and it must have been tremendously painful. They didn't have, well, nowadays you give some morphine or something for the pain. They didn't even have Tylenol, I suppose, or whatever was the equivalent back in those days. Is it possible to experience pain without suffering? We've had this discussion several times. The fact that Amit is asking about it shows that we need to discuss it again. Pain and suffering are absolutely not the same thing. Pain is a sensation to the organism. Physical pain is very well understood. How about emotional pain? Well understood. You can have physical pain, you can have emotional pain. Now my question, is it possible to experience pain without suffering? Well, if you were standing next to the bed of Sri Ramakrishna or Sri Ramana Maharshi, you would have no doubt in your mind that it is indeed possible to have pain without suffering. Already you get a sense for that because you know that things that bothered you so much several years ago don't seem to bother you so much anymore. That's how these teachings work. Situations are the same, but they don't make you suffer. They've lost their ability to make you suffer. Before we finish this, we should maybe define suffering better. The best definition I've seen is pain, physical and emotional pain, or what we know them to be. Suffering is your negative response to physical or emotional pain. It's like, oh, why did this happen to me? that feelings of being persecuted, feelings of resentment, of feelings of regret. Suppose you could have pain, physical or mental pain, without any of that. I'll give a very clear example. Suppose you have a headache and you meditate. Well, I've never given this. This is brand new. Nice. By the way, as an aside, one of the reasons I love teaching, and especially satsangs, it's wonderful to spend this time with you. It gives me an opportunity to revisit topics I've taught many times, and it gives me the opportunity to be creative as a teacher. I love that. So you give me this opportunity to be creative, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And what's creative here is a new metaphor to explain the difference between pain and suffering. Suppose you have a bad headache, and you sit down to meditate. If you are a skillful meditator, you can meditate with a headache, no problem. If you're not a skillful meditator, it could be a challenge. But if you are a skillful meditator, fine. So you're meditating now. Suppose you make your mind completely quiet. Will you still feel the pain? What would make it go away? The head is throbbing. If you had pain in any part of your body, if you go back to our stubbed toe example from earlier, if you had any part of your body that was in pain and you meditate, that pain is still present. But if your mind becomes silent in meditation, is there any suffering? It's so obvious. Pain can be present in the absence of suffering. And further, you don't even need meditation to prevent suffering. These teachings are adequate to prevent suffering. So this is the difference between suffering and pain. Okay, a couple more questions and we'll wrap up. This question is from Brijesh, who lives in Singapore. This is interesting. I'm working as a professional in a multinational company. My question is, I feel that working towards getting a promotion in my job conflicts with the objective of seeking enlightenment. He goes on to say, if I work towards promotion, then I may have to go the extra mile and need to spend more hours at work than usual, which takes away time, mind, and space, takes away my opportunities for spiritual practice. Are these objectives contradictory, or can they be aligned? Okay. There's a real easy answer to this. If getting a promotion, if we can have some fun with this. So just back to the Nachiketas story. If you have a choice between a promotion and enlightenment, choice is clear. Who needs a promotion? By the way, more headaches, right? The higher you go, the more headaches you get, so enlightenment. But it's a little more complicated than that. The problem comes in pitting these two against each other. A lot of problems in life are problems that we ourselves create. And here, the problem we create is a conflict between profession and spiritual practice. And many people feel that because professions can be extremely demanding, and that's definitely what Brijesh is dealing with, the demands of a profession. So that profession can be so demanding that it takes away time from your spiritual practice. As a young man, I felt that so badly. I had a profession. I was also deeply engaged in spiritual practice. I felt that conflict every single day because I had not yet learned to practice karma yoga. Karma yoga is a one word, by the way, it is one word, it's a compound word. Karma yoga is a one word answer to Brajesh's question. And that is, your work need not be different than your spiritual practice. After all, karma yoga can be explained can be understood very simply as a set of teachings that converts your ordinary activities into a kind of spiritual practice. That's an accurate description of karma yoga. I don't want to go into the details because it's a big discussion about what is karma yoga, how does it work. There's a recent video on my YouTube channel called The Secret of Karma Yoga. If you watch that video in just a 20 minutes or so, you will really understand what is karma yoga, and you will understand clearly how, for Brajesh, if he watches that video and really understands what karma yoga is, and if he puts it into practice, then what Brajesh will discover that going to work is as much a spiritual practice as staying home and watching Swami Tadatmananda on the screen. So the point is that we create the conflict between mundane work and spiritual practice. That division must be erased. And I rarely use the word must. Those of you who know me, I rarely use the word must. That division is the enemy of your spiritual practice. Tell me, unless you are fortunate enough that you can retire and just be at home and just sit around, you don't have any... Who has that lifestyle? The only people who really have that lifestyle are these sannyasis who live in caves and are fortunate enough to have some village people bringing them food every day. Short of that, do you think you're ever going to live without responsibilities and duties and things that you have to do? It will be there. That conflict then will be there. Even for other sannyasis. And just make a joke out of this. In fact, maybe we'll make this the last question as well. We're coming up on 1 hour. Just to have some fun with this. So take a sannyasi who hasn't studied karma yoga properly. You said they're not all enlightened. So this sannyasi, he was absent the day that his guru taught karma yoga. So now, so this sannyasi is studying all these scriptures and meditating and going to the temple and praying and fasting and doing tapas and doing all of these spiritual practices. Very intense, very engaged in all these practices. And then, suppose he lives in Rishikesh, and at 11 o'clock in the morning is the time when, if you want food, you go to the Anakshetra. There are institutions set up in Rishikesh and other places where sannyasis can go. You stand in a long queue, and it is a long queue. You stand in that queue, and when you get to the front of the queue, you're carrying your little diksha pot. Usually they're aluminum pots they carry nowadays. And then who carries a wooden kamandulu? But anyway, so you show up with your aluminum pot, they pour in some dal, they give you a stack of rotis, and off you go. Suppose our sannyasi, who's studying got up at Brahma Muhurtam, 4 o'clock, spent the whole morning studying. It is now 10:45, and the sannyasi knows, I have to go across the river to that Anakshetra, I call it, Baba Kamli Wala Kshetra. So this Baba was apparent. apparently he wore a kali kambla, a black blanket he wore over his shoulders, and he was very famous. Anyway, they made this, he got this kshetra, this institution formed, and they feed hundreds of sannyasis every day. I'll tell you in a few minutes why I know that. So anyway, at 10:45, he's feeling irritated because he has to interrupt his study and meditation and go across the river, stand in this long line for half an hour until he gets his dal and roti. He feels irritated. Why should my spiritual practice be interrupted by this? You see the problem? He should have attended that class on karma yoga. Why should your spiritual practice come to an end when you have to go for diksha? That's what they call when a sannyasi goes for food. It's called diksha. So why shouldn't that also be spiritual practice? And if that sannyasi had properly understood what karma yoga is and put it into practice, that would be every bit as much a spiritual practice as studying his scriptures and meditating. It's just different kinds. So meditating is one kind of practice. Studying scripture, another kind. Going to the mandir, another kind of practice. Standing in that line is a great practice. And I know that. This is kind of a funny story. I used to tell funny stories. This one will surprise you. In 1993, I was in Rishikesh. I had studied for many, many years under my guru's guidance, and he agreed to initiate me with sannyasa. So we go through all the rituals. Actually, 2 full days. The prior day is all rituals, and then the whole night is more, you stay up the whole night chanting, meditating, fasting. And then the next morning is the conclusion of the rituals. You go you bathe in the river, get rid of your clothes, you take the vows of sannyasa, Guru gives you this vastra, Guru gives you the name, Guru gives you some instruction, etc. And then it's all over. So that's all morning. It's all done by 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. It's done. Then what to do next? Well, at least for me, the most important thing to do was to sleep. I spent the whole night doing this ritual. So then after sleeping, what comes next? Lunch. All right, I've been fasting for a day or so lunch. And the instruction, I took sannyasa with one other man from, actually he was a Tamilian living in Kolkata, and I knew him well. I know him well. He's still in Kolkata. So Puja Swamiji addresses us both and says, since today is your first day of sannyasa, I want you to go to this anakshetra and get diksha. He said, it'd be good for you to have that experience. Puja Swamiji himself did that for several years. So he wanted us to have that kind. He thought it would be a good experience, and he was right. A wonderful experience to really understand what sannyasa is like in that Rishikesh context. Very different than our American context. So, and we were both delighted that he would instruct us in that way. And to stand in that line with all those sadhus, made me feel wonderful, blessed that my guru had given sannyasa and that I had become part of this tradition. I felt incredibly blessed. To me, that was a great spiritual practice, to stand in that line. Eating the food wasn't so wonderful. Very thin dal and very dry rotis. But then again, if you're a sannyasi, you don't Oh, can I have something? You imagine a sannyasi goes up to the front. Can I have something else? Do you have a menu? Sorry, I'm being silly, but I'm also making a point. And that is, when you approach your work with the attitude of a karma yogi, it's not an obstacle to spiritual practice. It is spiritual practice. And consider this, many people have to work a lot. Then wouldn't it be wonderful to have all those hours of spiritual practice added to your life? If you're going to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, why not convert that into spiritual practice? That's a lot. Probably more than you're doing otherwise. So karma yoga is absolutely crucial. So if you're not familiar with the teachings and principles, by the way, karma yoga is very subtle and surprisingly complex. If you think karma yoga is to act without expecting results, you don't know anything about karma yoga. And I'm sorry to use such blunt words, but our common, ordinary ideas about what karma yoga is are mostly wrong. Karma yoga is a wonderful and powerful spiritual practice when it's properly understood. Sadly, it's not often understood that way. So again, that video is there, The Secret of Karma Yoga. I think you'll enjoy that. This would be a good place to conclude our satsang. We'll end with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.